Thank you for coming out. I'm Robert Bristow. I'm the president of this small but vibrant congregation. And I'm just going to say just a very few quick words about it, which is that I'm going to read our mission statement. We are an open and compassionate community that welcomes diversity, fosters intellectual, cultural, and spiritual growth, and works for a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world. And in terms of stuff that you have to believe, that's it. There's no creed. Every Sunday is a little bit different. And I'm going to pass this around. If anybody would like to be on our email list, we get an email once a week saying what services are coming up. There's no obligation. Please don't feel any pressure. So that's all I have to say about UUGSB. George, I think you all, does everybody here know George? George is an amazing singer, songwriter, activist. He originated from Long Island, but he is spreading his music and message all around the world. We were just talking about how he has made nearly a dozen trips, I think, to Australia. And so he is going to perform for us tonight 2 sets. There'll be a brief intermission in between them. And so without further ado, George Mann.
I'm so glad to be back here, and it's so nice to be here with people I know for the most part, and for those of you I don't know that well, we'll know each other a little bit better by the end of the week. As Robert said, I guess I met this guy first in the room back around 1990, and I met Robert and Jennifer maybe a year or 2 later. And some of you I've met through the Peace Smiths and the coffee houses and the Being group, right? Wendy and Mark. And I did know your dear mom, Nina, Marion's mom, who was a good friend of my friend Julius's, who some of you, like Ron and others, got to meet over the years. And it's 10 years this summer that Julius passed away, August 2009. And I just talked to his sister this morning, his only surviving sibling. I called her just because I said, I'm going back to Long Island, where I played many times, Julius. I'm going to see some of our old friends. And she's in a nursing home in Cleveland, and not doing that great, but still with us. So, I'm going to do 2 sets tonight, and I'm just going to swing it as usual, friends. I don't have any kind of a plan. I know certain songs I want to sing for you. Sadly, some of you who were last night at the Peace Smiths are going to hear the same songs that you heard last night, but I'll try to mix it up a little bit. And I'm going to be singing a bunch of songs off my new record. I finished a new album called One at a Time in October of last year. I'll be sharing a bunch of those songs. What I'm going to sing first, though, is on that record. It's an old wobbly song. One of the most radical songs I know. The IWW are the Wobblies, in case you didn't know that. And I am a member of the Wobblies. Joe Hill's one of my heroes. It's called We Have Fed You All for 1,000 Years, and even though it was written over 100 years ago, it could have been written yesterday. We have fed you all for 1,000 years, and your hair was still unfed. But it's never a dollar upon your wealth that marks the worker's debt. We've given our lives and our husbands' wives. The gold is your legal share. But if blood be the price of all your wealth, good God, we have made it fair. There's never a mine blown skyward now, or we buried alive for you. There's never a wreck to shorewood now, but we are its ghastly crew. Go wrecking our dead by the porches red, and the factories where we spin. But if blood be the price of your lawful wealth, good God, we have paid it in. Wrecking our dead by the forges red, and the factories where we spin. But it blood be the price of you know the days when you chained us in your ears to the strike a week ago. You're taking our lives and our babies and wives, and we're told it's your legal share. But it must be the price of your awful wealth. Good God, we have bought it fair. It must be the price of your awful wealth. Good God, we have bought it fair. Now for our friend there with the video camera, I'm going to be doing a lot of that up and down. I'll try not to do too much, but I think I'm getting old. I'm sitting down a little more, especially after a week I've had. I did something like 13 concerts this week, including 3 hours yesterday at the Veterans Home before driving 4 hours to the Peace Miss, and certainly catching up with me. But that's what I love about a coffee house kind of atmosphere in a Unitarian fellowship. You can kind of let your hair down, metaphorically or physically, you know. I changed my shirt, and we'll put a good shirt on, and we'll just kick back and sing you some songs. So I want to sing you this one. One of the ones that, well, I saw you all. I've seen you all. I haven't seen you guys since last year, but I've seen these two. They live up in Ithaca now, and we're part-time. And when I was out here last May, you six were in the audience. I was at a friend's house doing a house concert, and I just started the new album. And I was kind of at a crossroads because for the first time in my career, and I think I've produced something like 16 albums, not all my own, but 16 albums that include compilations I've made with other artists. The first time I was starting a recording of an album and I didn't know what was going to be on it. I had 3 songs, I had 2 covers, including that one I just sang that I knew I wanted to record. And I was kind of like, all right, I hope the songs will come, you know. There's not a lot in the backlog that hasn't already been put on my records. I don't write a ton of songs. And the wonderful thing that happened was I kind of was pushing myself to write new songs. In a sense, because I had the deadline. I wanted to get the new album out before I did the 5-week tour of Australia and the West Coast last fall. And somehow, it worked out. Just a couple weeks after I was here in May, I saw the 6 of you guys. Another school shooting happened down in Texas. Not the one that happened on Valentine's Day, of course, in Florida, part of it, right? And one of those kids was interviewed on the TV in Texas, and I saw her say, you know, it's a safe place. We never thought it would happen here. And I got me sitting down at the piano, and I don't play piano much. And this song came out that day. Paul, did it really happen here? You said it couldn't happen. Give in to your fears. Now nobody's laughing. There's far too many tears. Everything unraveled. The options disappear. They said it couldn't happen. Did it really happen here? Put it on a record. I need to get it down. 'Cause if it happens someday, I might not be around. And as that day approaches, become so clear. Wring our hands wonder, did we let it happen here? How we stand around and wonder, did it really happen here? Now, as usual, when I'm in the studio, it's a quandary because I go out as a folk singer with one guitar. I can't bring the musicians I play with up in Ithaca on the road. They don't come for free, and they don't fit in my suitcase when I fly overseas. And so I have to present my music in a way that I don't really enjoy. I should rephrase that. I enjoy playing, of course, but I would prefer to share the music with people with the full band if I could. And every time I go into the studio, I vow I'm going to go more in the folk direction. But when I start writing songs, half of them end up being songs that need a beat and need electric guitars and stuff. And you know, I was a rock and roller, still am to some degree. So this is one of the new songs that I think I'd already written this one. I think when I saw you last year, it's called "There's Nothing Like a Mother's Love." And I didn't write it about my mom, though she is beginning to suffer from dementia. She's 86, out in Colorado with my 3 sisters and my dad. They all moved to Colorado, left me the only New Yorker of all things, you know. Slowly they all made their way out of Colorado. We were a skiing family, and that's why my first sister went, and the rest of them followed eventually. But I wrote this because I was singing in the veterans home where I was yesterday, and you know, I'm there every Friday when I'm not on the road, usually 40 or so Fridays a year, and you get to know the folks pretty well. And I was singing, there's this lady I knew for years, and I'd met her daughters a couple of times. She has 2 daughters that I know of. And one day I walked in, and the daughter was sitting there, and I walk in with my guitar. I just burst in. I don't knock or anything. The door's open. I say, "Hello, can I sing you a song today?" And she looked up, and "Oh, you're here." And then she looked at her daughter, and I said, "Hello to her daughter." And she said to her daughter, "Have I introduced you to my son?" And her daughter and I looked at each other and we just shrugged and said, "Okay, let's go with it." I said, "Yes, how are you? Nice to see you." And it happens a lot. You know, I talk to people and, you know, they're in various stages of dementia. Not everybody, obviously, in the homes I sing in, but I sing in dementia wards and Alzheimer's wards all the time. I spend half an hour in the Alzheimer's ward every Friday at the veterans home. And you can be talking with somebody and you're having a perfectly lucid conversation. And then all of a sudden they'll say something like, "Yeah, remember when I saw you back in Binghamton in 1970? I was like, I wasn't there in 1970, you know? So I wrote this, not just for that woman, but of course thinking about my mom. And someday when it gets to the point where she might not recognize me, you know? So it's called "There's Nothing Like a Mother's Love." Last year, oh, it was the first time, and the calls stopped coming here for weeks at a time, and you asked me if I'm getting used to it. A little more, I say, holding on to the last of the memories as they slip away. There is nothing like a mother's love. There is nothing like a mother's love. If there's just one thing I'm certain of, there is nothing like a mother's love. Now she smiles and she takes my hand, slow to me. Then she asks, have you met my son? As she points to the orderly, and you ask me if I'm getting used to it. A little more each day, holding on to the last of the memories as they slip away. There is nothing like a mother's love. There is nothing like a mother's love. If there's just one thing I'm certain of, there is nothing like a mother's love. There is nothing like a mother's love. If there's just one thing I'm certain of, there is nothing like a mother's love. I was in this process last year of doing the album and touring a little bit, but not too much during the summer while I was working on the record. I said I had this deadline. I had to have it in production by the first week in September. It was going to make it back 3 weeks later, you know, to have it ready for the tour. And we made it by one day. Literally, she got shipped to me the day before I was leaving, or 2 days before I was leaving. Yeah. But so because I was kind of struggling a little bit as a writer, those of you who write know what I'm talking about, I imagine, whether it's creative writing or research or historical writing or journalistic writing or songwriting, if any of you write songs. You know, the magic doesn't just come out of nowhere. It just, you gotta wait for it to happen. It's like, and you can't make it happen, you know, and I've learned that, you know. I don't struggle to write songs, I wait for the magic to happen, because it's like, I kind of like, subscribe to Arlo Guthrie. I heard him say this once, the Arlo Guthrie School of Songwriting, right? He says, it's kind of like fishing, you gotta be patient. You just put your line in there in the river, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and sooner or later you're gonna reel one in. Just don't fish downstream from Bob Dylan. So as ultimately I wrote 7 new songs for the record, which is, you know, not as much as I wanted to, but it was enough. And with a few of these cover songs I'm going to share with you tonight, and 2 old ones. I revisited this song, which I wrote in 1998 for Woody Guthrie. I was a young organizer back then, or beginning to slowly make it into middle age, I guess. And I was still learning a lot about Woody Guthrie and the history of folk music. And some of what I'll be talking about tomorrow in this service is how that connection to social action, the connection between social action and folk music, and how folk music can inspire or be inspired by social action. So Woody Guthrie was I'd read the Joe Klein biography. If you've ever read Joe Klein, the famous Rolling Stone reporter, this guy wrote the book Primary Colors about Clintons and made the movie, right? Very famous journalist, and he had written this incredible book about Woody Guthrie. It's the definitive one. It was published in 1980. So he was able to talk to a lot of people who knew Woody Guthrie well. They were still alive, you know. And I just read that book and I wrote this song. And it was on the first record I made with Julie. It's called Young and Younger. And then I never sang it hardly ever again. And I thought, man, in these times, Woody Guthrie's message is still so relevant to us as people who struggle. And so I re-recorded this on Woody's birthday. Just so I didn't pick that day to do it. I was in the studio. We book the studio days months in advance sometimes, you know. All right, we're ready for those 3 days. We're going to book, you know, those 3 days. The studio's open, I'll take them. And I was booked on July 14th, which just happens to be Woody Guthrie's birthday, and is also... Just checking, just checking. And it's called Oklahoma Sun. They made us sing it every morning like the sun, and the words all ran together till it ended up as fun. All the images riches forever captured by an Oklahoma sun. That would be the biggest thing a man has ever done. Oh, you were past it by the time that I was born, and your Huntington's disease had left you frail and mute and torn. Already bound for glory, a million thoughts, 1,000 songs. Already passed to legend by the day that I was born. You were Oklahoma's son, but in the end belonged to no one. Signed painter, singer, sailor, soldier, born. Both a father and a child, a fascist fighting Union man, writing songs and poems for everyone. Well, the Dust Bowl couldn't stop you, not with the bulls and the railroad yards. They found thousands of your people under bridges and boxcars. There was opportunity in everything you saw. A chance to turn a witnessing into another song. You were Oklahoma's son, but in the end belonged to no one. A sign painter, singer, sailor, soldier, born. Both father and a child, a fascist fighting Union man, writing the songs and poems for everyone. Sure, in later years you staggered drunk, disabled, rambling on. There's so much touch on life and work, cherish and pass on. And though they don't sing all your words in polite tone to me, still I know this land was truly made for you and me. So every time I sing that song, to the old and to the young, yeah, I sing all the verses like I know you should have done. And I bow my head to greatness, make sure they know who you were. That's the greatest gift I got from Oklahoma's son. That would be the greatest gift from Oklahoma's son. That would be the biggest thing man has ever done. Now, if you're listening closely to the words there, I didn't do what I said I was supposed to do in that song there. I usually introduce that song when I sing it, tell people, you know, everybody knows the greatest American folk song is This Land Is Your Land, right? I mean, certainly by popular acclaim and by most people's opinions from Pete Seeger on down, right? But most people don't know that Woody wrote 6 verses to This Land Is Your Land. And when that song, and he recorded it in 1944, but it didn't go anywhere. He was no big recording star in his day. He got his Huntington's disease, struck him down by 1955. He was in hospital most of the rest of his life. And when Pete Seeger was blacklisted, Pete Seeger started singing that song in the late 50s, when the only places that would have him, Unitarian churches, colleges, schools, communist, young communist camps, right? He was playing in those places because that's all that would have him, because he was blacklisted for many, many years. And he started singing This Land Is Your Land, and it spread like wildfire. I mean, think about it. Every one of the folkies of the 60s recorded that. The Kingston Trio, I heard it as a kid, right? Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, the Brothers Ford, everybody was singing that song. But they only sang the first 3 verses. They left out the radical verses. The ones about people starving by the steeple in the city, and the one about his concept of private property, right? So yeah, I see the knowing glances here. You know those verses, right? So I figured we might as well sing them. Why not, right? All right. Now there's 6 verses. I usually don't sing the 3rd verse because I don't feel it says much. It's obviously, there's wheat wheels waving and the dust clouds rolling. But if you know all the words, we'll sing. But I can tell you one of the great memories of my life, and we are going to get to him in a minute, was in January 2009, standing in the freezing cold in front of the Lincoln Memorial when Obama was inaugurated. I didn't see the inauguration, I saw the concert. And Pete Seeger and Bruce Springsteen sang "This Land Is Your Land" with 90 children, freezing their asses off in 10-degree weather. And if you go on YouTube, you can see this. Bruce Springsteen tells the story. Just Google "This Land Is Your Land" Bruce Springsteen, or Bruce Springsteen, Pete Seeger. Bruce tells the story. He says, you know, I said to Pete, I said, hey Pete, what songs do you want to do? We're getting to sing for the inauguration. And Pete said, you know, Bruce, I only want to do one song. I want to sing, well, you got these great songs, "This Land Is Your Land." But I want to sing all the verses. And they taught those verses to the kids. And they sang. Now, there's those verses are the 4th and 5th verses of the song. So listen for them, and we'll go all the way through. This land is your land, this land is my land. California, New York Island, the forest, the golden waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that criminal highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh yes. This land is your land. This land is my land. California, New York Island, from redwood forest to the ocean waters. This land was made for you and me. Now roam and ramble, follow my footsteps. Spark the sands and down the deserts. And all around me, a voice is sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to New York Island, from the redwood forest to the ocean waters. This land was made for you and me. The sun came shining, and I was strolling, keeping you waving, and the sky rolling, and the bottom lifting, a horse was chanting. This land was made for you and me. Everybody! This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to New York Island, from the redwood forest to the ocean waters. This land was made for you and me. You ready? Here it goes, right? But in the squares of the city, by the shadow of steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people. I stood there hungry, I stood there wondering if this land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. California, New York Island, from the river forest to the ocean waters. This land was made for you and me. Now Julius always liked this one, and it's my favorite too. There was a great big wall there that tried to stop me. There was a great big sign there, said private property. But on the other side, it said nothing. And that side was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. California, New York Island, from the redwood forest to the ocean waters. This land was made for you and me. Nobody out there can ever stop me as I go walking my freedom highway. asking me, sent me an email about a week ago asking about Pete Seeger and a song that Pete sang about the Clearwater. I don't know that song. We figured out which one it is, you know. But I told him I would certainly mention Pete Seeger and sing a song that honor him, because about a month from now is the 100th anniversary of Pete Seeger's birth. On May 3rd, 1919, Pete Seeger entered this world and departed it on January 27th, 2014. And as big an influence as Woody Guthrie has been on me, bigger influence personally than Pete in terms of songwriting. But Pete was an influence on me, well, probably because I got to meet him and know him a little bit. And I produced an album that he narrated about the Almanac Singers. The only album that's not on that sales table out there, by the way, because we printed 1,000 copies and then Pete died 6 months later. And the guy who made the project with, we decided, well, that's a long story, but I'll get to it. Pete knew Rick Polari. Rick's a banjo player out of Burlington, Vermont, by the way. And Rick and Pete went back many years. He met Rick when he was a teenager. Rick was a teenager. And since he was a banjo player, Pete, of course, kind of took him under his wing. He was a member of the Clearwater Sloop Singers and played Clearwater a number of times. And for years, Pete and Rick would bandy about the idea of recreating the Great Almanac Singers Tour of 1941. You never heard of that? I didn't think so. The Almanac Singers. Well, they came through California. Maybe you were there in the womb. It's the only group that Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie performed together, even though they were friends still at the end of Woody's life. The Almanac Singers. And they started out singing sea shanties and anti-war songs in 1940 before Pearl Harbor. And in 1941 they made the seminal Union Songs album called Talkin' Union. It had 6 songs on it, including Union Maid, and Pete's Talkin' Blues, Talkin' Union. And Woody was out west doing the Bonneville Power Dam songs, songs like Roll on Columbia. He was writing for the Bonneville Dam project. And Pete sent him a note and said, come on back, we're going to do a tour of Union Halls. And they were on their way to California to sing for Harry Bridges' union, the longshore workers. Harry Bridges is a great Australian trade union leader who came to the United States and helped lead the general strike in San Francisco in 1934. You know, the wharf, of course, where the warehouse workers were killed, the longshore workers were killed in the strike there. Well, anyway, they did this tour out of the back of an old sedan. They weren't famous. They're playing for Union Halls. They put the record piles of the album, 78 it was, in the trunk. It was an old gangster's car that they had bought because the gangster didn't need it anymore, if you know what I mean. He met a mysterious ending way too early. But this car had bulletproof doors, had bulletproof glass, got 4 miles a gallon, Pete said, and leaked oil like a sieve. But they were able to buy it because it was big enough for 4 of them to sleep in, believe it or not. They could fit 2 in the front, 2 in the back somehow. And they went on for a tour. Lee Hayes, Mil Ampel, Woody, and Pete. And they toured all around the country singing for unions. Well, anyway, Rick and Pete talked about this for years, and it never came off. Pete couldn't do it, or wasn't going to do it, but Rick didn't have the union background to really know how to put together a tour of Union Halls. But when Rick met me through Utah Phillips, we became friends, and then we planned this in 2013. We recorded this album that Pete Seeger narrated about the Almanac Trail on that tour. We did the tour, 26 concerts in 32 days. We covered 9,200 miles.
Wow.
From Pittsburgh, the first gig, all through Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Detroit, all through the Midwest, Milwaukee, down through Iowa, all the way to Colorado, out to LA, up north to Bellingham, and back in 32 days. And then Pete passed away 6 months later. So that album is called The Almanac Trail, and it's available online. You can digitally download it if you're that big of a Pete Seeger fan. It's available. Just Google The Almanac Trail, George Mann. You'll find it on CD Baby. It's probably on Amazon too. And Pete Seeger narrates. We recorded the songs that were on that album. And Pete tells a story every couple of songs comes in. It's really sweet. So anyway, long story short about the song I'm going to sing. One of my favorite songs that Pete sang is How Can I Keep From Singing? And he didn't write it. It's based on an old Shaker hymn from 16, 1700s. And the last verse was had by a woman named Doris Plenn in the 1950s, during the Blacklist period. And Pete sang this in many of his concerts. He loved this song. And it has a line for you called, "How Can I Keep From Singing?" It's the last line of each verse. And in times as challenging as we're facing, don't forget that we've been through it before, right? Many of you have done this 2 or 3 times in your life. The Vietnam War, right? Nixon. The McCarthy era. So you were, well, maybe old enough for that. Teenagers, right? And of course the George Bush era. E-R-R-O-R. Not error. That ain't my accent. My life flows on in endless song, above Earth's lamentation. I hear the real go far ahead. That hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? And Pete used to go, how can I keep from singing? Give it a little tremolo on the key. But though the tempest loudly roars, I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble, sick with fear, and hear their death knells ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? In prison cell and dungeon bar, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? How can I keep from singing? Very nice. Mary, you want to go on tour to Australia?
Sure.
I could use a backup singer.
I'm there.
Sorry, Alex, not room for 3 though. Only one in the suitcase. No, I wish I could, like I said, my musicians with me up in Ithaca, I wish I could even bring them down here, but, of course, bring them on the road, you gotta pay people. You can't just say, hey, come take a ride with me and we'll split the takings, at the door, So, but no, it's nice to hear voices singing. We'll do a few more sing-alongs, but let me do 1 or 2 more and then we'll take a quick break. All right, we'll do a short intermission, stretch, get a cup of coffee, 10 minutes, check out the music if you like, and we'll do some more. But I want to sing you 2 more. We were doing this last night, those of you who were at the Peace-Smiths, I was singing a lot of sad songs because, well, folk music is generally sad a lot of times, the political folk music where it's about struggle. And so I want to sing you 2 more before we take a quick break. The first one will lighten the mood just a little bit, okay? Now, I know as much as you do that these are troubling times. So it's always good to lighten the load just a little bit by making fun of Donald Trump. In the Bush years, it was so easy, and it's not, Trump is pretty easy target too, but to be honest with you, I haven't really wanted to write many songs about him, because partly I've been thinking any day he's going to be gone, any day now the Mueller report's going to die, any day they're going to get him for something, But I wrote this little ditty right before the election, 2.5 years ago now, and I figured Well, he wasn't worth more than 2 minutes of my time anyway.
There you go.
And besides, as all of his wives said, he wasn't good for more than 2 minutes anyway. But you can help me out here. I don't do those mouth trumpets that rump, rump, rump. You were doing this last night a little, right? Can you help me out? Well, here's a little song about Donald Trump. I promise I'll make it quick, 'cause I know that just the mere mention of his name can make most people sick. It's short and stumpy like Donald's fingers and tiny like his toes. Just something to whistle until he's gone. Here is how it goes. Sing along. Donald Trump, Donald Trump, drop the T and it's Donald Rump. Seems to fit 'cause he's such an ass. He's big and he's ugly and he's mean and crass. Donald Trump, Donald Trump, drop the T and it's Donald Rump. Seems to fit 'cause he's such an ass. He's a big time loser and he's got no class. Well, that crazy hair, that orange glow, that pasty doughboy mug, it's all part of the package if you vote for this stupid thug. Now, I'm not saying that Hillary's perfect, I'm not saying that Hillary's great, but I know one thing about Hillary Clinton: she can't make America hate. Like Donald Trump, Donald Trump, drop the T and it's Donald Trump. Seems to fit 'cause he's such an ass. He's big and he's ugly and he's mean and crass. Donald Trump, Donald Trump, drop the T and it's Donald Trump. Seems to fit 'cause he's such an ass. He's a big time loser and he's got no class. Seems to fit 'cause he's such an ass. He's a big time loser and he's got no class. And that's all we'll say about tonight. Thank you.
The Teflon, hopefully not.
Yeah, the real Teflon Don, right?
Yeah.
All right, let me close out with this one, and thank you again for coming. Appreciate you being here. If you're interested in the songs, many of the songs I'm singing so far are from the new record. I'll tell you more about that if you're interested, and I'll share with you some old songs in the next set too. But this is one of the new ones. Now, when I was out here last year, the same thing happened. I started the writing process right after I saw those of you who were at my concert last year out in Brookhaven, and this song came about a couple weeks after that too. It was only a week after I wrote the song about the gun shooting in May. It was a good May, and well, good May for songwriting. There's a guy I know in one of the veterans' homes, Jim. He's in the Alzheimer's ward, and I met him about 3 years ago, I'd say now. And the way I met him, you know, I go in and I sing there for an hour twice a month. This is up in Batavia, actually, all the way up near Buffalo. And I've been singing there. Julius used to make the trip with me 17 years ago. We'd go all the way up to Buffalo. We'd do a weekend of gigs up there in the Moosewood Restaurant. We'd sing at the Moosewood Restaurant, by the way. That was one of the things that brought me to Italy. And Jim is a veteran, and you know, you sing in the Alzheimer's ward, and they're in various stages, you know. Most of them can still talk, you know, but as you know, Alzheimer's is a progressive, slow deterioration, primarily of verbal, right? They lose their verbal skills, and yet, I've witnessed this, and I've seen this many times, people who can barely speak or don't talk for months, you hit the right song and they start singing along. And the nurses start crying, and the doctor's like, look, he's singing, you know. And then they go back in their shell, you know. Anyway, Jim, the way I met him, I was singing, and there's, you know, 15 of them spread out around, and all of a sudden this guy starts grabbing his hands on the table, bang, 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 bang. And I was scared he's going to hurt himself. I didn't know him, you know, and he was hitting the table like hard. I go, nurse, is he okay? He was a drummer. So I went along, and all right, and you know, and for I go there twice a month now, but back then I was only doing it once a month. And I'd see him every month, and you know, he'd rap along and play along. All right, Jim, not too hard, don't hurt yourself, I'd say, you know. And he kind of could talk a little bit, but very little at that point speech. Over the next year or two, slowly that diminished even, to the point where he stopped. For the last year or two, up until last May, I Yeah, I'd see him for about a year, you know, once a month, twice a month. Last year or so I've been going there. And they wheel him in and he'll sit there. And you get right in his face. Hi, Jim, how you doing? Totally blank face, no response. I can't get a word, I can't get a smile. But he's watching his eyes, he's listening to the music. You know, he just can't respond. And I know he's in there. Well, last May, a few weeks after I was out here, I'm doing a rock and roll song or whatever, and I hadn't even noticed him. He was in the corner in his wheelchair bed. But all of a sudden I see something that's catching my eye, and I look, and one little finger is doing this.
Aww.
One finger. I was sitting in his wheelchair, just one finger. I go, Jim, you're keeping the beat again. I couldn't get him to say anything, obviously, but he did that for a song or two. And I haven't seen anything like that since from him in the last year. I went home that weekend and wrote this song. Because I was struggling with writing, like I said, and I was thinking, well, boy, the worst thing of all for a songwriter would be, what if you got nothing left to say, right? You think about Woody Guthrie, by the way. Huntington's disease. It's very similar to Parkinson's. And the last couple of years of Woody's life, he was shaking so much that they didn't have the drugs to control it, right? And Marjorie tells the story. His wife would come, she'd come in and she had two big signboards. One said yes, one said no. And she'd put them in front of him and she'd ask a question. And eventually he could hit yes or no, and that's how they knew the brain was functioning. It's just they couldn't communicate, you know? So in Jim's case, I thought, wow, he's still there. He just can't do anything, you know, to let me know, you know, verbally. So I went home and wrote this song called Nothing Left to Say. And I recorded with some beautiful cello from my friend Marty on it. And I haven't sung it for Jim, of course, because I don't know, you know, what it would do if, you know, you can't gauge what kind of reaction he would have, you know, if he'd even understand it's about him, you know. But I just saw him last week, still going. Jim is sitting in the corner, they've engaged in pocket break, as I launch into another song. It's one thing that starts to shake. It's been months since he has spoken. Mostly he just sits and stares. Long ago he was a drummer. Now he doesn't leave this chair. Oh, so I smile at him and I feel the chill. I can see him slipping away. My greatest fear, one day I'll find you here with nothing left to say. Several years ago I met him. Music jolted him awake. He wrapped his hands upon the table, so hard I feared that they might break. But now the drummer's hands are quiet, silenced by the hands of time. But that one finger still remembers, and it's sending me a sign. So I smile at him and I feel for Jim. I can see him slipping away. My greatest fear, one day I'll find you with nothing left to say. Yeah, I smile at him and I feel for Jim. I can see him slipping away. My greatest fear, one day I'll find you with nothing left to say. break bathrooms are back there to the left if you're interested or need to use them.
Yeah, and
Interest, we gotta use it, we gotta use it.
over here, okay.
Interest is notwithstanding. Oh, good to see you.
If I had a hammer in the morning, hammer in the evening, all this land, I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between brothers and sisters, all over this land. And if I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, and I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. And if I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. And I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and sisters, all over this land. Now I've got a hammer, and I've got a bell, and Norm's got a song to sing, all over this land. This land of justice, this land of freedom, this is all about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. That's the hammer of justice, this land of freedom, this is all about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Hey! What? No, you're fine there.
What?
Right here. Is this
Oh,
next to you?
your mug, you're wearing it.
Oh.
You didn't hear it. Well, so
Where was this one?
a little more freeform this set. I'm going to do a few songs here, and then we'll open the floor up. Did anybody want to sing or share anything themselves tonight? If you want to, feel free. Just let me know so I'll take a break for you. Maybe somebody wants to read or sing something. We'll see. But here's another one from the new record. And as I said, when we went in to record with the band, we were going to start the project with the 3 songs that we had ready to go. And I was going to record, a couple of acoustic ones on my own. But I really didn't have a clue what the rest of the album was going to sound like. So we rehearsed the 3 songs we were going to record. And I'm thinking, man, I'm paying these guys to come in the studio. We're setting up the drums and the bass and the guitars. It takes a couple hours just to set up the recording, And you're paying $60 an hour. I said, I might as well get an extra song out of them if I could. So I told them, I said, if I come up with another song in time for the studio in a couple of days, I'll let you know. In the morning we were going in to record. Well, I started the night before. And out of nowhere, like I said, we're talking about this. I don't know why the song came, but there I was, 7 a.m. that morning, going to the studio at 11 a.m. to start the setup. And this song came out. And this one's a rocker on the record. I mean, it's actually, I love the band, the night they drove with Dixie Down, Up on Cripple Creek, all those great songs. So I said to the guys, I said, I want this to sound like the band. It's a homage to the band, It's got organ and, the band kind of sound. But we're going to hear it the way I wrote it, which is unplugged. It's called 1960s Holiday. And for those of you who are a little bit older, some of you might remember the 60s. They say if you remember the 60s, you weren't really there. Ron doesn't remember the 60s. Nah! But no, I mean, I'm joking with my friend here, but he drove Jimi Hendrix to Monterey Park. He picked Jimi Hendrix up at the airport from Monterey Park.
No, I drove him from the hotel.
Oh, from the hotel, sorry.
Hotel to his performance.
Yeah, Monterey Park, and lived to tell the tale. Who else did you drive that day? Jefferson Airplane? Somebody else?
Bobby Weir.
Bob Weir, the great one.
Yeah, Bobby Weir. And then I did the Who. I drove the Who.
Oh, you also did the Who, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
right.
they both were like, you know, really headliners. And,
Yeah.
And they both destroyed their, burned
Yeah,
all their,
smashed up their
destroyed
equipment.
all their guitars.
Did you see them play too? You were
What?
there. You saw them perform.
Yeah, I had, you know, I had from the back.
Yeah.
I had to look, you know, backstage.
Well, I'll dedicate this to you, child of the 60s. Well, 1960s holiday, and it's the only mention of the unwanted one, Mr. T. Yeah. Though I didn't really bring him up in the song. I said, have we really gone down that far, Norman? Have we really lowered the bar that much that it can be jumped over by a washed-up B-list TV star?
B-list. I couldn't make that
C-list.
out.
C-list,
So I
probably.
couldn't make that out last night. Oh, B-list.
Days like this just make me wanna pack it in. Find a mountain of my own. Load the airstream up and roll it round the bend. Half a century ago, oh I wanna go. Sing with me, oh I wanna go. Oh I wanna go. Don't you run? Oh, I wanna go. This place no longer feels like home. Have we really gone down that far? Have we really lowered the bar? It can be jumped over by a washed-up B-list TV star. Yes, to this I need to make a getaway. Let's take a long extended 1960s holiday. You got the little purple pill rug? Don't eat the brown acid. Mom's got dinner on checkered tablecloth and all your favorite TV shows. Let's go back to when those hippies changed the world and the nation found its soul. Don't you wanna go? Don't you wanna go? Sing along, ready? Don't you wanna go? Don't you wanna go? This place no longer feels like home. Gone down that far? Have we really lowered the bar? It can be jumped over by a washed-up B-list TV star. Yes, to this I need to make a getaway. Let's take a long extended 1960s holiday. Yes, to this I need to make a getaway. Let's take a long extended 1960s holiday. That's a fun one to sing. As I said, I've been ignoring him for the most part. Hoping that someday our long national night will be over.
I consider them a symptom, not a disease.
Good point.
It's like blaming the weatherman for the weather.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he's the guy at the freaking top of the pile, you know? The one who's on TV.
Or the bottom, depending on the...
Yeah, right. Well, Well, talk about some of my old friends, like Faith Petrick. I don't know if that name rings a bell to any of you. She was a San Franciscan, by the way. She was a friend of Malvina Reynolds, a good friend of Malvina Reynolds. She lived near Malvina at one point. Huh?
I know about Malvina, I don't know about...
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you about Faith. Faith was a friend of Malvina's, and Faith wrote for Sing Out magazine. She had a column there for many years, and she was a friend of Pete Seeger's and a dear friend of mine and Julius's, and always stayed at her house in the Haight-Ashbury when I played there. And I'd always walk by the Grateful Dead house and hope a little of the vibes might rub off on me, you know. Imagine what it would have been like to have been there. Did you ever hang out on that porch, Ron?
No.
You know the famous story of the Grateful Dead house, 710 Ashbury Street, right? I mean, they used to have these porch parties. The hippies would just sit around and party for hours and hours in the front, on the front porch, and the Dead would play, you know. Well, Faith was not just a sweet old lady. She passed away in 2013. She was 98. And she was a fiery rabble-rouser, an IWW member, Industrial Workers of the World, a feminist. She was a single mother, left a bad marriage and raised her kid on her own in the 50s. And after some 25, 30 years working as a social worker for the city of San Francisco, at 55 years old, she took her retirement from her union pension, and she became a folk singer. Late bloomer like Julius was. But she was loved and revered by everybody in the folk world, and like I said, she wrote this column. She hosted the San Francisco Folk Club in her house for 40 years till she died. And they would have twice a month, they'd have gatherings there. And great lady, she taught me a lot, you know, and a lot about aging and the wisdom of the elders, you know. There was a time we were staying at her house, and it was winter. Oh, it gets chilly in San Francisco, as you know. These friends live San Francisco half the year generally. And we're going to start a fire because it was kind of wet and cold, you know. But her wood pile was all the way out the back of this big old Victorian. Had to go down, snake your way through all the junk in the basement, out the back door, and get the wood and bring it up. And so I said, oh, I'll go get some wood. We'll do a fire tonight. And Julie said, oh, I'll go help. And I immediately said, no, Julius, no, I'll take care of it. Because I was, you know, worried. You know, he's 90-something years old. He's 88, wherever he was at the time. And I said, I'll take care of it, Julius. No, you stay there. And Faith scolded me like I'd never been scolded by her before. She says, George, you let him help you. She said, old people need to feel useful. A very important lesson, you know. And I tried to argue with her, but I knew I wasn't going to win the fight, you know. I said, Faith, but I'm just worried about this stuff. It's dark, it's raining. Julius. All right, so we went out there. I gave him 3 pieces of small wood, you know. I carried the bulk of it and followed him every step up the staircase, and it was just fine. But she taught me a lot. And I wrote this song for her when she broke her hip at 94, you know. Now, I don't write a lot of humorous songs, but she had a wicked sense of humor, and she loved all the bawdy, Monty Python songs, stuff like that. She always used to sing this song. She got us in trouble in a church in New York City once. I thought we were going to get kicked out of the concert. The minister was in the audience. I'm exaggerating just a little, but she did sing this song, and the only part of it I remember is the chorus, which goes something like, if you haven't got a penis, then you cannot be a priest. This archaic stipulation should have long ago been ceased. Of God and love and Scripture, men and women both can talk. And what's more, you serve communion with your hands and not your cock. She was 90 years old singing this in a church in New York City. Anyway. Fortunately, the priest had a sense of humor. The minister. It wasn't a Catholic church. But anyway, so when she... yeah, it wasn't a Catholic church. But anyway, so when she broke her hip, we were all worried that she wouldn't come back with the memory. She was known as the Fort Knox of folk music. And that meant she knew... She was the repository. She wrote this column for Sing Out for many years. You can find it online. It was called The Folk Process. And she would talk about how songs develop and how they're adapted and how it's all one big song anyway, right? I mean, I haven't sung anything new to you tonight. You know, it's just the same chords and melody and different words, you know. But it's been said 100 times in 100 different ways, you know what I mean?
That's a song.
That's the folk problem.
That's a song. There's a song called This Is All One Big Song.
Really?
Who sings it? Who sings it?
It's on its own.
Who sings it, do you know?
The band is called Spiritual Reds. This is all one big song.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, anyway, so I knew she'd appreciate a little bawdy song for our funny song, and we were worried that she was going to lose her memory. Well, she came back, they put a titanium hip in. The next year, she fell and broke the other one in '95. They put a second hip in her. And I visited her both times because I had 12-hour layovers coming back from Australia those years, the way the flight was working. So I'd get off the plane after a 14-hour flight home from a tour in Australia, get on the Muni, go spend the day with Faith, and get back on my plane at 11 o'clock that night to get home, you know. And I wheeled her around in the second one, you know, because she was still in a wheelchair at that point after the second one broke. But anyway, at 96, she got on a plane to Ireland all by herself with 2 new hips.
Wow.
I visited her family and friends there one last time. And so anyway, I knew she'd appreciate it if you could get that titanium hip in that song. But there aren't a lot of words that rhyme with titanium. She wasn't Ukrainian, as I always think. She didn't like geraniums that much, and she certainly didn't like uranium. So I struggled, but I did find one more. And I wrote her this song, and I sent it off to her when she was recovering from that first one.
The first one.
The first broken hip, yeah. And then she broke the other one the next year. I didn't write a second song though. But I did sing this to her in her hospice just a few months before she passed in 2013. And it goes like this. It's called Dear Faith. I remember, you know, it goes back to Malvina Reynolds too. There's a song Malvina sings about don't send flowers when I'm dead, send flowers while I'm living. And she doesn't mean flowers, she means love, appreciation. Remember, either one of us could walk out tonight and never see the other again, right? So don't forget that lesson. So I sent this off to her as a love letter called Dear Faith. Dear Faith, I know you've heard this song before. There's so much that needs fixing, and you're now past 94. But for every little... no, hang on, let me start that again, I screwed that. Dear Faith, I know. Dear Faith, I know you've heard this song before. There's so much that needs fixing, and you're now past 94. Stop the tape. I sang this last night. You didn't get those little mental blocks?
You left it in
I think I'm getting old.
You left it in
Let me try it again. Dear Faith, I know you've heard this song before. Just so much that needs fixing, and you're now past 94. But for every little victory, there's a dozen who fights for. It's enough to put a strain upon your cranium. Dear Faith, I know the road will someday end. Soon you and even I'll be gone, and so will all our friends. But I know I'll see you standing tall until the bloody end. And that's because your hip's made of titanium. And every day's a treasure when you're pushing 95. You wake and you greet the morning and give thanks that you're alive. Yes, every day's a treasure when you're pushing 95. You wake and you greet the morning and give thanks that you're alive. Dear Faith, I hope you won't think that I'm wrong. I'll say there's better subjects to get folks to sing along. For every working stiff deserves a mention in a song. Today's your day, that's all I'm explaining. And every day's a treasure when you're pushing 95. You wake and you greet the morning and give thanks that you're alive. Yes, every day's a treasure when you're pushing 95. I wake and think of you, Faith, and give thanks that you're alive. There it is. Now, did anybody want to do anything? I don't want to put anybody on the spot. If you want to read something or what? Say something? Yeah.
Yeah. When you sang that every day is a treasure, it reminds me of something that someone put. I don't remember where I heard it, but it was within the last decade or so that someone had said that each day is called the present, because just to wake up and you're still here is a gift. So it's a present, like a gift wrap present, that you wake up and you're still here and not in the beyond.
You know,
When you were singing about being a treasure, that present, I made that connection.
no, I grew up.
And the other thing is, and one other thing is, maybe to do something that you did with Utah.
I was going to get to Utah in a minute.
All right, then don't add anything. Just roll with that when it comes. Just roll with that when it comes.
I try to get to all my mentors, and Utah's coming up. And Julius, and of course, our friends, Nina. Well, I wanted to tell you something. I was thinking about this. That whole arc of songs that deal with people getting old. We were talking about this a little bit during the break. Rachel was telling me, right? That when I go into these homes, many of the people I know, I never see a visitor. You know, they say something like 70% don't get a visitor after the first month. Often, you know, somebody in a nursing home, as you can imagine, it's skewed. It's probably about 75% women, 80% women. Because you live longer than us guys, first off. And secondly, it's more likely that the kids will want mom to be in a home once dad has passed away if she's getting infirm or worried about her safety, you know. And these lives just disappear. I see them every week or once a month. And you go back and they're gone. You know, you very rarely get to say goodbye. Though that is part of my job too. I sing on deathbeds all the time, you know. I mean, if somebody's I've known is not well and they say go in there, you go, you know. So all right, so let's get back to a couple other songs. So what did I want to share with you? I want to share you a couple of other songs. I'm trying to think of which ones now. You guys got me thinking. Got me a little off track. If you want to do something, let us know, but only if you want. This one I want to sing for you next is one I sang last night. And it's the one that's at the end of the album. And I usually, for the last few albums I've made, I get to the point, it takes months to put an album together because I can't afford to record it all at once, you know. And I'm writing songs as I go usually anyway. And this one, when I wrote it, I knew it was going to be the closer of the album. So it came about just out of nowhere. And I was thinking about the studio I recorded in Ithaca. It's outside Ithaca, it's in Newfield. Which is a little town 5 miles outside of Ithaca. And it's an old church. Built in 1908, this church, and it was turned into a recording studio by my friend Will, the guy who owns the studio. I became his client first, and then I became his friend. I've done my last 6 albums, most of the recording have been there. And when we go into the studio, we lock ourselves in and we just disappear for 8 or 10 hours, whatever, and for all we know, the world could be blowing up, you know? You often listen to the news at the end of the day or 8 o'clock at night and find out something happened that, you know, big, you know? So I imagine what would happen. And remember, this is a song that's tinged with sadness, but has a little hope in it. What if we found out the world was ending when we emerged from that bubble? And we just happened to miss it, you know, because we're up there in the woods in Ithaca, you know? So I turned it into a song called Fishing at the End of the World. And what I was thinking was this is the guy Will in the song is my friend Will, but we're not in the studio. We're going fishing or whatever. We're out in a hunting cabin in the woods. And that's when the cities start getting hit by the bombs. Now, when that happens, are you going to sit there and cry? Or are you going to go out in a blaze of glory, as they say? Right? Would you celebrate life one more time with those who are with you? Or would you just tremble and shake and cry till it's over? I think I'd go for the first one, party and celebrate with my friends, whoever's with me. Because at that point, you know it's not going to change, right? Anyway, so with all that, here's the song. Began like any other day. I made a list to be done. Suddenly the skies just turned to gray. I was still on number one, and the sound of the explosion was nowhere to run. Now I'm sitting in this cellar, this guitar in my hands. Will and I will go in fishing tonight. Someone else had other plans. You won't find me in this basement, no, no, as the final acts unfurl. Will and I'll go in fishing tonight, fishing at the end of the world. I look at him, he looks at me, we look outside again. We both see the city, dust and debris, carried by an angry wind. Will is thinking of his family, mine are also far away. Now I'm sitting in this cellar with this guitar in my hand. Will and I will go in fishing tonight. Someone else had other plans. We might not be here tomorrow as the final acts unfurl. Will and I'll go in fishing tonight, fishing at the end of the world. And if you want to come and join us, we'll give it one more whirl. We'll be sitting on the dock tonight, sitting at the end of the world. Well, and I'm going fishing tonight, fishing at the end of the world. You mentioned Utah Phillips, and you know, last night was the first concert I've done in many, many years, I think, where I didn't even talk about Utah. And it just slipped my mind. It was only a 1 hour set, so, you know, it was a coffee house.
You did last year, though, a lot.
Well, yeah. Well, because last year was the 10th anniversary of Utah Phillips passing.
Oh, that's
and I was here in May at the coffee house, and I was on my way to California 3 weeks later, because just an incredible project. Utah Phillips, speaking of somebody you all are familiar with, at least a little bit, one of the great folk singers, songwriters, not as well known as people like Pete Seeger or Woody Guthrie, but certainly to me one of the people with the most integrity, and of course one of my great mentors, and I was lucky enough to be a friend of his and visit him and stay at his house, and he's on all the records we made while he was alive, and all the anti-Bush CDs and even the Veterans albums we produced, he's on both of them. And I put a song of his on every album I made since he died, and I send $100 royalties to the family to help keep his music alive, you know. But anyway, I met him about only 5-6 years before he passed, and what happened last year was he used to live in a railroad car. Well, not used to live in a railroad car, but he was a hobo for one point after he had served at the end of the Korean War. And he had, years before he ever struck out into the world as a folk singer, he was writing songs and scattering them around. People like Rosalie Sorrells was sharing his songs, but he wasn't performing. He was working as an archivist in the state library or something in Salt Lake City, the state repository for archives, you know. But what happened was he struck out in 1969 as a folk singer and came east. By then people...
They remember him calling it an uncivil servant.
Okay. When he was working, yeah. Well, he finally left his last job and he decided to try to make a living as a folk singer. I'm leaving a lot out. I could speak for him about him for an hour easily. I've done hour-long concert presentations on him at festivals. Long story short, in 1975 he had a record contract and he bought for $500 an 1880-something railroad car and he parked it on the grounds of the studio up in Vermont. And he lived out of that for 3 or 4 years when he wasn't on the road. And people who came to the studio would see him, stay there. And anyway, that car, the studio eventually, he moved on, he moved west. And that car stayed there for 40 years on this farm. The big old barn was a recording studio. Philo Records was there, big folk label of the day. Finally, the record company went bust. They sold the property. The guy who bought it, the car sat on the property for 40 years. And about 2 years ago, we heard it was put up for sale. Guy wanted to get it off the property. So his son decided, why don't we raise money to transport it 3,000 miles across the country to the Black Butte Center for Railroad Culture, which is a museum in Weed, California. And it's not really a museum, it's more of an underground collection of railroad cars, but it's open to the public and they have events, and I've been there a few times. And we raised something like $22,000 to ship that railroad car across the country. And last May it was reassembled and dedicated at this railroad museum to Utah Phillips. So now it's a shrine. And if you're interested in this, just go to thelongmemory.com is what it's called, the website, or just utahphillips.com. You'll find it. And there's photos, and I put a lot of my stuff on it, photos of it on Facebook. But he was a great man. He wrote a lot of great songs. He was a veteran, he was a pacifist, he was an activist, he was a Unitarian. He helped establish the Unitarian Fellowship in Nevada City, California, where he lived for the last 23 years of his life. And when I met him, he knew I was already mining his territory because Utah made it his mission to keep alive the stories of the old workers, of the IWW, those who fought against World War I, who were anti-war, you know, the pacifists, the communists, the Wobblies, of course. And when he met me and Julius, he had already been playing my music on his radio shows. And the first words he said to us when he saw us at the festival was, "George and Julius, I love you guys. I've been playing on my records, my radio show." And of course, when you meet your hero and that's the first words out of his mouth, what do you say?
Wow.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips, you know. But we became fast friends, and he spent like most of that weekend talking to Julius when he was free. They spent hours talking. And then, of course, he took me under his wing a little bit. And he taught me a lot about the trade. He taught me things that I still use in my presentation, in my booking, in my concerts. He taught me it's better to be liked than to be good. Now, what you do? Think about that. He taught me, among other things, he taught me to drink whiskey instead of vodka so people would know I was drunk and not stupid. That was one of his lines. But he wrote some great songs. Now, among his great songs that some of you might have heard are songs like one Emmylou Harris recorded, The Green Rolling Hills of West Virginia. Utah wrote that song. He wrote a song called The Goodnight Loving Trail, which Merle Haggard recorded. And Tom Waits recorded a really ragtag version of it, but it's a good Tom Waits version. And a song, Starlight on the Rails, which Charlie Pride recorded. And every once in a while, I'll get an old guy in a nursing home, "You know any Charlie Pride?" And I'll go, "Well, I don't really know any Charlie Pride, but he sang this one song called Starlight on the Rails that my friend Utah Phillips wrote." And very often they'll recall that song. I'll say, "I know the guy who wrote that." So this song I'm going to share with you, I'll sing it too, quickly, all right? His songs are real, I mean, Utah was a shot to the brain. He had that worker shorthand, so to speak. He didn't write 8-minute songs. He wrote songs that in 2 or 3 minutes told you exactly what the hell was going on. Now I'll sing this one first. It's called All Used Up. Not an old worker. I spent my whole life making somebody rich. I busted my ass for that son of a bitch, and he left me to die like a dog in a ditch. And he told me I'm all used up. He used up my labor, he used up my time, squandered my body and squandered my mind. Then gave me a pension of handouts and wine. Told me I'm all used up. kids are in hot to a god you call work, slaving their lives out for some of the jerk. Yeah, my youngest in Frisco just made shipping clerk, and he don't know how used up. The young people reaching for power and gold don't have respect for anything old, or pennies that bought and for promises sold. One day they'll all be used up. Yeah, they use up the oil, they use up the trees, they use up the air, and they use up the sea. Well, how about you, friend, and how about me? What's left, we're all used up. I'll finish my life in this crummy hotel. It's lousy with bugs, and my God, what a smell. But my phone still works and I'm clear as a bell. Don't tell me I'm all used up. And outside my window the world rushes by, gives me a handout then spits in my eye. And no one can tell me, cause no one knows why. I'm living, but I'm all used up. Sometimes in my dreams I sit by a tree. My life is a book of how things used to be, and kids gather round and they listen to me, and they don't think I'm all used up. And there's songs and there's laughter and things I can do. All I've learned I can give back to you, and I give my last breath just to make it come true. And no, I'm not all used up. Yeah, they use up the oil, they use up the trees, they use up the air, and they use up the sea. Well, how about you, friend, and how about me? What's left when we're all used up? Now this song I'm going to sing for you, this other one of Utah's, I know a bunch of his songs, but I want to sing you this one because it's called Hood River Roll On. And as I said, I record one song of his on every album I've done since he passed. And this one is on the new album, one at a time. And it's a song about, what Utah did was, of course, he studied the hobos, and he studied the workers who built the railroads and dug the mines and made the highways and the train tracks that built the infrastructure of this country, because he knew that those stories would vanish with those workers. And often he would preserve them in songs. And he scattered songs around. For example, the Basement Tapes, right? Bob Dylan and the band. Mm-hmm. All right, there's Bob Dylan singing Utah's song Rock, Salt, Nails in 1967. Really crappy version, but they were, they're in the basement of the band house, big thing, right? But Utah Phillips hadn't even started singing professionally for 2 more years. But Bob Dylan knew that song that he'd written because it was being passed around. So this song, Hood River Blackie, is a song about Hood River Blackie. Hood River Roll On is about Hood River Blackie, one of the great hobos. Now, you might laugh when I tell you this, but the hobos are pretty well organized. I mean, there's a hobo museum in Britt, Iowa. I played there in 2013 on the Almanac Trail Tour. And I met, you ever watch American Pickers? Sure. Hobo Jack. Okay, I met Hobo Jack there. He's one of the guys that go there. He's a hoarder and has a lot of stuff. But Utah was a Grand Duke in the Hobo Convention. Every year since 1901, the hobos have a gathering. They turned this little town of 2,000 people into a big festival for 3 days. And all the hobos from all over the country come in. And Utah was there many times. Hood River Blackie was one of the Grand Dukes of the Hobo Convention. And he was a self-taught man. You know, he left his home at 15. He did hard work. He was an apple knocker, as they call him. He's somebody who would shake the trees and gather the apples. He followed the apple harvests around. And he was a very intelligent man for a self-taught man. He, later life, he wrote for railroad magazines and wrote about the hobo lifestyle. And when when he passed, Utah wrote this beautiful song about him called Hood River Roll On. Because he remembered when he met Hood River Blackie, he says, well, he credited him with saving his life. He says, I was a young hobo, and this was after Utah come back from Korea, all disillusioned with what he'd seen over there. And he said, I rode the rails drunk for several years, you know. But when he was a young hobo, in those first months, he says, he met Hood River Blackie once. They were all getting on a train, and this guy, older guy, grabs him and says, young fella, you got all these strings and ropes hanging out of your bindle there. You're going to get caught on something and dragged a considerable distance. I'm going to teach you how to do that right. And they missed the train because he sat down and taught him. But he taught him how to roll up his bindle properly and to make it safe, you know. And he crossed paths many times. But Hood River Blackie died around 1984. And there's a museum out in Sacramento where there's a railroad museum. Hood River Blackie narrated the hobo exhibit before he died. I don't know if it's still there, but Utah used to tell that story. Someday I hope to get there. And he wrote this song, though. It's a beautiful song called. Now, easy song to sing the chorus. You feel like singing?
Yeah.
Hood River roll on, there's so much to remember. Hood River roll on, there's so much to remember. The old times are gone. Hood River roll on, Hood River roll on. There's so much to remember. The old times are gone. Hood River roll on. And he says, when Hood River Blackie died, he took the drive from Nevada City down there to that museum. An hour and a half away, 2 hours away. And he said, I stood in front of that exhibit and he wrote this song for his friend. The rusty pot bubbles, the bottle goes round. Did you hear about Blackie? He flagged the westbound. The young ones strip off to get drunk in their dreams, while the old men sip coffee and stare through the steam. Hood River roll on, there's so much to remember. The old times are gone. Hood River roll on. Well, the fire's knocked down, the balloons are all packed. They're coming and flapping along this track. The green kid remembers the old man's advice. He shakes out his bellow and rolls it up nice. Hood River roll on, there's so much to remember. The old times are gone. Hood River roll on. While the box rumbles up on a black cinder grave, some tumble inside, the others just wait till scattered by smoke or the crunch of the shack. But no one looks up and no one looks back. Hood River roll on, there's so much to remember. The old times are gone. Hood River roll on. Now this last verse is kind of an invocation for Blackie. He's sending him on his way. I didn't tell you that when a hobo dies, they say he caught the westbound. That's to hobo heaven. That's the last train ride, right? May along Apple Valley stay green through the fall, and your magic wine mountain watch over us all. Lead your old apple knockers in and out of the snow. Let your rubber tramps ride where the trains never go. Hood River roll on, there's so much to remember. The old times gone. Hood River roll on, Hood River roll on. There's so much to remember. The old times are gone. Hood River roll on. Now, again, I usually do a little better explanation of that song. I haven't sung that one in a long time. I mentioned he was an apple knocker, right? And in that last verse, when he says, when Hood River Blackie got too old, and when a hobo gets too old to ride the rails, but they still want to travel around. Remember, hobos are not bums. There is a very distinct difference. They say a hobo works and wanders. A tramp dreams and wanders. Whereas a bum just drinks and wanders. And that is the hierarchy, so to speak. The hobos were workers. They're itinerant workers who traveled. Many of them, remember, were World War I veterans dealing with PTSD that was undiagnosed and untreated in those days. And that's why they were hobos and couldn't stay in one place very long, or felt the law coming down on them and we move on, you know. So he talks about it. He says, when a hobo gets too old to ride the rails, like Hood River Blackie did, he still wanted to do the apple knocking. He bought a pickup truck and he became a rubber tramp. Rubber on the road instead of the rails, right? Yeah. And the crunch of the shack, he says, so scattered by smoke or the crunch of the shack, that means the cops, the bulls coming out of the railroad shack to beat up the hobos, you know. All right, I want to wrap up with two more songs for you, okay? This one, and as I said, I wasn't sure what I was going to sing, so it's kind of making it up all along, but I do want to sing this one. Julius died 10 years ago this summer.
How old was he again?
93. Utah died 10 years ago last May, and Utah was 73. Interesting parallels. Julius died in 93, Utah died at 73. Julius was born in 1916, Utah was born 20 years later. But they both died 8 days after their birthday. Interesting. You know, just a weird novelty about them, you know? And they were both very important mentors to me. So I wrote this song for Julius a few weeks before he passed away. But I also was writing it for Utah. And the second verse talks about Utah in a way, the words going out that you've caught your last train, westbound, like we were just talking about. When Utah Phillips died in 2008, I was camping that weekend, and I got a call from Ann Feeney, my dear friend, who was a good friend of his too, and she had heard the news first, you know. And there I was in camping with 15 friends or whatever for the weekend at my camp upstate, and got the word that he had passed. You know, we knew he was close. He had congestive heart failure, and in the last months he was struggling just to live, you know. So I wrote this for him and for Julius, called Welcome Home. And I've sung it a few times for veterans or for their family members. And you don't need to be a veteran to understand this song. As a matter of fact, tonight I'd like to dedicate it to Nina's memory too. Because she was an old soldier too. A soldier of the barricades, of the picket lines. Right? The struggle for a better and a more free and just and someday equal world for all of us. So all three of those folks will sing this one called Welcome Home. The drums are kicking in and your breathing is slow. The doctors all say any day you could go. The hands are too weak to even pick up the phone. And you know that can't be called living. There's a faraway look I've never seen in your eyes. There's the knowledge the future holds no surprise. And there's a chorus of angels when an old soldier dies. The gathers around him to sing, welcome home, welcome home. What a life you have led, what a story you told. Welcome home, welcome home. Going out that you caught your last train. All the years of hard rambling and to this sad refrain, and only those who've known struggle would ever explain. And they rise and salute for to greet you. And there's a faraway look I've never seen in your eyes. There's the knowledge the future holds no surprise. And there's a chorus of angels when an old soldier dies. The gathers around him to sing. Sing with me. Welcome home, welcome home. What a life you have led, what a story you've told. Welcome home, welcome home. And with you on my mind, I'm never alone. Welcome home, welcome home. What a life you have led, what a story you've told. Welcome home. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out. I hope this space is utilized, beneficial to the fellowship. I hope you grow. I hope you find more people to come out and share this beautiful space. And if I can come back here a year from now, I gladly will. I usually get down here only about once a year. It's, boy, I gotta be honest with you, I hate the traffic out here. I mean, I left here in 1996 for New York City, and that was pretty bad traffic, but at least I didn't have to drive every day, you know? But it's always joyful to see you, and thank you. And tomorrow morning, I will be doing service with Robert. Will be helping leading the service tomorrow, and 10:30, so if you feel like coming back, well, my main sermon will be very focused for about 20 or 25 minutes on, as I said, the connection of folk music and activism, and how these threads all come together for me as a folk singer. So if you're up to it, we'll see you tomorrow morning. But we should do one to close out. So I think, well, the one I always love singing, especially in a Unitarian culture. Last night I had the strangest dream I'd never dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. And I dreamed I saw a mighty room. It was filled with women and men. And the paper there was signed and said they'd never fight again. And when the papers all were signed and million copies made, they joined their hands and bowed their heads, and grateful prayers were prayed. And the people in the streets below were dancing round and round, and swords and guns and uniforms were scattered on the ground. Now that's where the original song ends. It comes back and sings the last night verse. But Faith Pendrick taught me, as she taught many people, this verse. And she said, you know, a great song that is, but it doesn't tell you where we're going to go to get to where we want to be. I don't even know who wrote this verse. She might have had a hand in it, but she taught it to me, so I'm going to sing it for you. Listen up, it goes like this. When I awoke, it was just a dream, and peace was but a word. I tried to tell them of my dream, but nothing could be heard. And then I thought, there is a way, and I knew just what I'd do. And I'd organize and work for peace until my dream came true. One more time. Last night I had the strangest dream I never dreamed before. And I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. Yeah, I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you all.
Thank you, George.
And we'll see you, some of you tomorrow morning, hopefully for service, 10:30.